and welcome back to Tiny Artist TV and the new series I'm starting on my channel called Art Blocks, where I help you get unstuck by building better idea and art foundations. So we're starting out simple here. The first video is going to be something that most artists have forayed into, and that's going to be portraits. Now, I want to start out by saying there is nothing wrong with the classic 3/4 portrait, but I want to show you guys how to kind of break out of that safety zone. So let's look at some references and get started. So what are the art blocks that we're going to be looking at today? Well, of course, we're going to be looking at form, we're going to be looking at angle, we're mainly going to be looking at expressions realistically, and how to utilize expression to inform the form that you want to use for your portrait and to mold and portray your character's personality. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do to build up our art foundations, we're going to look at the reference library, or start, looking at the words to use to build a better reference library. So starting out, I started with classical portrait. As you can see here, just scrolling through, there's a lot of that 3/4 angle, because in classical portraiture, a lot of art is informed by the culture around it. A lot of art of this time of portraits, typically you want to show off either a status or a particular type of diminutiveness when it comes to women in portraiture. So something like this would be considered a little more scandalous, a little more forward-facing, because a forward-facing portrait was usually reserved for men or more masculine figures. But when we switch to modern portraits, you can see that the times have shifted. You can see that a lot of this portrait is more forward-facing, with a more equitable personality shift in who can be front-facing, who can be more expressive and take up more space on the canvas. And we just keep scrolling down here, and you can see a variety of styles here as well from different periods. Chiaroscuro, you've got more abstract, a lot of the neon and color blocking that's more evocative of modern and postmodern art movements that were in the 60s and 70s. And so there is, as you can see, a variety of sources that you can get your inspiration from. And I only listed the two that are typically the most popular. Renaissance was also a popular one, but I'm not trying to give an art history lesson, otherwise we would be here all day. So the next thing to do in that step is to figure out, okay, what forms do I want to use to portray my character? And what do I mean when I say that? Well, let's go to the canvas. So here I have this nice blank empty canvas. If you are, on social media, I'm sure you've seen floating around. It's a little old at this point, which is a little ridiculous to say that it's old because it's only been a few months removed, but the cat meme. And actually Drawfee did an iteration of this based on one of their patrons' suggestions of taking animal forms to make human faces, because of that theory that Japanese anime faces are based on cats, and so they took that and saw if they could make other animals into humans based on facial structure that way. It's actually a really good exercise to kind of create new characters based on, again, how you think their personality would fit into something non-human, especially if someone's described as burly or lithe or sly or what have you. The list goes on. So when I'm talking about form, what I'm talking about is the actual underlying structure of the face. So I'm just going to get my nice little sketchy pencil here. So you've probably heard of different face shapes like heart, almond, square, oval, things like that. And I would actually recommend that you use those as starting points for your facial structures. And in animation, there's a little more room for squashing and stretching those figures than if you're trying to do a more photorealistic style of portrait. But I would even encourage you even if you're not doing like a caricature or an animation leaning portrait, to just play around with that and see what it does for your character's look overall. So here I'm just kind of sketching out some face shapes that are kind of often talked about. A little more round. And you can already see that just drawing out these simple shapes will give you a more variety of portrait structure to start out with. Here are just a few examples of different face shapes in action. Let's move on to talking about the angle of your facial structure. So, as you can see here, not only do I have my references, but I have my own personal references from a drawing that I did where I used more than the traditional 3/4 angle, and I did this to show a variety of not accessories, but a variety of things that are on my character's facial plane. I wanted to do a more full picture of Ilnara than just the typical standing character model, because she has a lot of interesting things going on. So when you're drawing your portraits, think of that. Did your character have any interesting scars? Do they like to show it off, or are they more ashamed of it and they want to be in angles where that's a little more concealed? So for her, I wanted to show off her personality, that she is curious, she is joyful, and so I used different angles to show that. We'll get more into that when I get into expressions and how to push those expressions, because as you can see here, she doesn't really have eyebrows, she doesn't have a nose, she doesn't have lips, and those are big things in showing expressions. But even without those things, I was still able to show the various expressions on this particular character. But going back into angles, we're just going to turn this layer off. So you can see here in my corner that I have not facial references, but I have skull references. I am a strong proponent of just getting down into like the nitty-gritty, the basics, and building up from there. Because if you start with something that's already semi-formed, you're trying to create another form on top of that. Whereas if you start with the bare bones, pun partially intended, you're gonna have an easier time creating your character around that. As a matter of fact, give me just a second. Meet my friends. Hi. So if you don't have one of these, just wait until Halloween when they're like at the Dollar Tree or whatever, grab one. This one is actually a fish tank ornament from an old fish tank that I had when I was a child, and obviously I don't have that anymore, so this is a good reference for different angles. This one I just had lying around because I thought it was cool. Again, I can see that this was part of a Halloween collection, but this one is slightly open, so it's kind of more in the vein of like pushing into expressions or whatever. This one is a little more desk friendly. As you can see, it fits nicely in the palm of my hand versus this big old honkin' thing, which would be good if you have multiple people drawing with you and you need something that multiple people can see from a distance. But we're neither here nor there. I like this one because I don't know how well it's going to show up, but you see this? Everything is labeled. This skull is anatomically correct, and I love this because this is just really good for, again, building up your reference vocabulary. When you need to look something up, it's best to know the name of it so you can get better references. And so I often have this one kind of close by when I am referring to various parts of the face. And so I just have these guys kind of hanging around. But how's this going to help us? Well, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see what's on the screen here and what's here to figure out where we're going with this. This is just a better, like, it's a 3D way to really be able to see what's going on with the face. So you can take what you're seeing and translate it onto here. Like, if I wanted to do the sort of like the psycho, hold up. Oh, there we go. My camera's mirrored today, so it's a little funky for me. Like, the typical, like, oh, he's about to go psycho anime pose. I can see where the brow is and how squat the eyes look compared to a frontal version where the eye sockets are more full. And basically just do my best to translate from what I see here to on the canvas. Alright, so let's look at some different angles and what they can possibly convey that leads into choosing what type of emotion you want to evoke from your character. So as you can see here, I've taken my references and I've sort of fleshed them out a little bit more, just kind of showing where the eyes, lips, nose, where all of that would fall on these particular angles and forms. Even here you can see I've added a neck just so I can better adjust what I want my final piece to look like. So we have our first image here, which is retranslated here, and I have the note here that this is a neutral pose, fully engaged. And so what that means is that this particular character is fully engaged with the audience. They're fully engaged with whoever is supposed to be perceiving these particular characters. This is usually used when you're just doing front-on references, or if you just kind of want to, again, do a very neutral expression, just getting your idea out there. This is just, it is what it is. Here is a front-facing school portrait of my OC or my fan art or my character or whatever. The next pose, or the next angle, this is a slightly, so both of these could be considered 3/4 to an extent. This one is truly 3/4. This one is more of, oh, what would you call it? It's just slightly tilted to one particular direction. This less exaggerated, or this less extreme 3/4 view, I have the note here that this is partially engaged with the audience, that this is a more curious, that this character is angled in such a way that it is inviting the viewer into, you know, interacting with the character, but it's not full on, it's not eye contact, it's just kind of off to the side, like, oh hey, didn't see you there, kind of thing. Whereas this one, this again, this truly 3/4 view was very popular in classical portraiture, but this particular angle, so I have here that this is angled away from the audience, not engaged with the audience, unless you change something about the expression. Usually in this case, it's only going to be where the eyes are placing. A more accurate description would be less engaged, not necessarily not engaged. If the eyes are away, they are fully unengaged with the audience. If the eyes are towards, they're more engaged, but it may be could be a more serious, could be more coquettish. It depends on how you finalize your eyebrow placement, lip placement, etc. But typically this is a less engaged pose and posture for portraiture than these other two here. This next one here is classic side view. This is not at all engaged, and I have the note that this is usually used for referential portraits. If you're doing character turnarounds, you'll typically see this here. You probably won't really see this a lot in art, unless it's, what I'm thinking of is like, you have a panorama of a lineup of characters and it's all the portraits and it's all of the side views. But again, they are not engaging with the audience at all. They are simply meant to be perceived by the audience without engaging in the audience's attention. This next one here, depending on the expression, this is a very extreme difference in presentation. So with the head up, if the eyes are facing up, this is going to be a more austere, a more reverent pose. If the head is up and the eyes are looking down, this is a very hostile pose for you to choose for your character portraiture. Usually you see this used for villains with the head up, and it's usually a long, zoomed up pose. The head is up, the eyes are looking down, like they are looking down at the audience. versus if this is a character who is looking up. They are not engaged with the audience, but rather they are inviting the audience to look up with them and to view the thing that is above them that is causing them to engage in this reverence. And the last pose from this reference here, this, I didn't have any notes on it. This is almost a gentler version of this pose here. This, if you place the eyes looking sort of down and to the left, could also be not so much hostile, but maybe more annoyed or stern, versus if the eyes are looking up, it's more of a stalwart pose, a more like hunkered down pose, a strong pose of like defiance, if you will. So these two are really good like angles to get into if you want to break away from the 3/4 angle that engages the audience in a very polarizing way depending on how you express your character, because again, it could be a very stern or malicious experience with these particular angles, or it could be a very again, stalwart and austere and reverent experience that the audience is engaging in. And I have a few bonus poses down here. This one, the kind of like back and over the shoulder, again, depending on expression, this particular over the shoulder pose can be used for resentful characters, or a more sly and coy kind of like, oh, haha, or like, oh, like not engaging with the audience, with the exception of the eyes that are telling the audience what kind of emotion the character is experiencing and what kind of vibe that they're sending out to the audience. And then this one here, this is the head down. I don't have my skull with me, I put it back in the other room, but the head down, eyes up. But because she's smirking, instead of it being like Psycho, like if I made the eyes wider and the mouth smaller, that would be the classic anime Psycho pose. But she's sort of like, So this is a more playful way to play with that angle. So this is just kind of a breakdown of some standard angles of portraits that aren't necessarily this 3/4 situation here. Again, great, comfortable if you're doing just sort of, you know, here's my character, these three, there's nothing wrong with those. If you want to push your personality or push the character's personality into their portrait, consider involving their body. What are their shoulders doing? How is their head turning in relation to their body? Is it an open posture? Is it a closed posture? Are they trying to make themselves smaller? Are they trying to make themselves bigger? And then it's all going to come together. Let's take a look at a few of those examples. So I figure the best way to show you is to show you. So what I did is I copied the neutral face, and I'm basically using this to show you how to make even a neutral face. Well, okay, let's not call it neutral face, because I am going to use these to do expressions as well. A neutral starting pose to make it more interesting. So as you can see, I have involved the shoulders as mentioned, and a few of these poses are more open, a few of them are more closed. Let's start with this one here. The face is turning forward, but the shoulders are facing away. So this sort of indicates that this character is interested in what the audience has to offer. They maybe have engaged in something else, like they may have been walking somewhere, and then you said, hey, they turned enough towards you to, give you attention, but their body is still facing towards a different subject. This sort of shows that the character is sort of casual and open and engaging, but depending on the expression, this could change the attitude of the shoulders. So I have on a different layer here. Let's do this in red. At a first glance, because this character's got this sort of little copy-paste smirk on, even just changing it down to sort of a, oh, this character feels more curious. The body language is still, again, more open. It's more, it's at least intrigued with what the audience's presence is. And so let's make him, you know what? Yeah, let's make him annoyed. So this is the brow line. The brows are going to furrow here. a sort of neutral annoyed, the eyes are going to be a little more open. If he's really like, why are you bothering me? This is going to scrunch up. The eyes are going to be very, very small. You may even see a lowering of the top lid as well. Like sort of this, And then the mouth can either be small and pursed, like a very tight, thin line, kind of like, yeah, that sounds fake, but okay. And just kind of drop a nose in here just to have it there. Or it could be a smirk. Now, this pose is sort of, this character seems like he was walking somewhere and then something shiny caught his eye and an idea, probably not a good idea, popped into his brain. So even though this character, again, is front facing, the body language gives you so much more information about what this character could potentially be up to. This middle character here, I did draw this with the intention of this being a female character, with the example of, okay, are they trying to be smaller? Not to say that, like, you know what, a lot of my female characters are like big and take up space. This one is kind of more like typical anime trope of like the moe small cute girl. So you can see here everything is pressed in, everything is sort of like, the shoulders are sort of raised up to sort of protect her, but everything is still sort of like scrunched in and like made very small. And another typical anime pose. This sort of expression of just like distress. Or if we raise the eyebrows, and now she's kind of like, to push that, well, you probably wouldn't do this in a portrait necessarily, but you could even do a little bit of action around the shoulders. But now this character seems very impassive in that she's just kind of, I don't know, frontal facing, but because of the direction of the eyes, is no longer really fully engaging with the audience, despite everything else being in the front. If this was going to be a truly front-facing all the way, you just have the eyes here. If we're going to make this as neutral as possible, it's just going to be flat mouth. Very neutral, but because of the height of the shoulders, she now seems a little unsure, a little guarded, which is kind of what this gesture indicates. Is it's a subconscious protecting of yourself. This next guy over here is super chill. This is a super inviting character. I'm even going to just I'm going to make his expression gleeful. I'm just going to lean into what the body is already doing. He is clearly waving at the audience. He's got this gentle little smile here. I'm going to have his eyebrows raised. And you can either make the eyes closed, indicating like a large gleeful expression, or you can just have his eyes be open and just sort of neutrally looking at the audience. This is pretty much as safe as it can go for a character portrait. It's just kind of like, it's literally just, hey, it's me. So I think the best way to make this more interesting is to close the eyes. This just feels more gentle, it feels more expressive. And I'm actually going to make him a little kind of like, oh hey. So maybe this character isn't quite sure what to make of the audience perceiving him. Maybe he's a little bit shy, maybe he's a little bit just kind of like, yeah, I'm here, but like, don't perceive me. It's a more relaxed version of what's happening with the shoulders here. He's inviting but unsure. The opposite is to have, of course, neutral facing forward, shoulders forward. This character is fully engaging with the audience and is maybe even getting a little bit in your personal bubble, getting a little bit closer than you might be comfortable with. To push that feeling, I'm going to give this character a smarmy expression. So the way that works, unfortunately, this has kind of gotten the name of like the DreamWorks smirk, but it's where one eyebrow, you've got one angry eyebrow and the other one is sort of swooping like this. So maybe he's leaning in to tell you a secret, like, hey, I saw this thing over here. And, yeah. So to say, if he's looking over to the side, he's getting in your space, he's inviting you into this idea. If he's just looking directly at you, this is a very intimidating, very, like, bold choice to make for your characters. You want to use this pose if your characters are that type of person to just like, hey, I'm all up in your bubble, what are you going to do about it? And last but not least, we have this sort of soft, studious pose. This is a more turned version of this pose here, and that whereas this posture is more open because it's partially facing you, partially facing away, but in a polite way. This one, the body is completely facing forward, is not towards you at all. As a matter of fact, the shoulder is even facing you, sort of blocking off full access to the body language, but the face is politely engaged with the audience. I typically like to use a facial expression of something of almost boredom with these particular types of poses, simply because usually if a character is posed like this with the body facing forward, the character is going to be a little more, just generally a little more closed off. They may even be looking away altogether, and the only thing facing you is the front. So now you can see that this character kind of looks a little bored, a little bothered. Even if I give them a smile, it's almost a little like, yeah, this is great, but I don't want to be here. And let's have them engage with the audience fully by turning the eyes forward. And let's bump up that expression. This is almost like a candid photo of, again, the character, the body is facing away, so the character was in the middle of doing something, or may not necessarily have wanted to be captured in this moment, but is still facing towards you to pay you some amount of attention and respect. So that's just some ways that you can make a front facing, like neutral front facing expression more interesting by just incorporating body language into it, and then of course playing around with the expressions as well. You can see how easy it is to use different expressions on the same pose to create a different emotion overall. If you're going to keep your character's portrait in this front facing, mostly neutral position, something else you could do to make the character more interesting is to adjust the angle of the head itself. So if I just take my anchor and tilt it this way, now he's curious, tilt it a little bit further, and maybe he's a little suspicious. If I tilt it as far as I think it should be allowed to go, like all the way to the side, almost resting on the shoulder. That could definitely be used to portray a more intense character. Someone who would usually have this kind of expression. And then, of course, this would be angled appropriately, because the shoulders wouldn't just stay straight. But, yeah, so the vibe, I'm uncomfortable with the vibe that we have created in the studio today. Moving on to some other examples from my own personal portfolio, just to show you some more juxtaposition of poses and expressions. So this is a classic gentle 3/4, a partial, we'll call it a partial turn. The expression is very neutral. They're fully engaging with the audience. Their face and body are turned away, but the eyes are still facing forward, again, fully engaging with the audience, possibly even perceiving the audience as a threat or a target, considering that he is in motion and is wielding a weapon and is very clearly moving towards the audience, reeling back to move forward. When we look here, we have dead on, front facing. The expression, you can see eyebrows are turned way down. Smirk is all the way up. It's creasing the eyes. Because when you smile, when you smile, you'll notice that your cheeks push your eyes. So you want to make sure that when you're doing any sort of, like, in this area, any sort of eyebrow and cheek work, the eyes need to reflect that. Because if you just do, let's say this, you've got neutral eyes, but your eyebrows are creased, and your smile, like, that's crazy. That's literally crazy. That's like uncanny valley. Like, you're not moving, like, parts of your face that should be moving are not moving, or are not shown to be moving. You want everything to move because everything has muscles and it needs to flow together. Otherwise, your character is going to look absolutely bonkers. But when you're creating emotions, and again, use your references, think of it as if your face is a paper ball, the expression, of course, when you're more angry, when there's more pressure, everything is going to scrunch in. That paper ball is going to crumple. So you just want to really crunch everything in. And when you're more excited or relaxed, everything is going to kind of flex out and be more relaxed naturally. When you're sad, there's going to be somewhere in between that. The brows are going to go up, but everything is going to scrunch in an upward direction, showing concern. I don't know how to better say that other than to illustrate that, and of course, just filling my canvas with references here, but that's the best way. The face has muscles and skin that if you are trying to illustrate strong emotion, you've really got to lean into pushing and pulling those features to create, a meaningful piece of art. Not meaningful, evocative, that's the word I'm looking for. An evocative piece of art that fully or better communicates what you're trying to get across to your audience. Okay, last but not least, let's take our blocks and build some art. So let's take a look back at the blocks that we used to build a better portrait. The first thing we looked at was form. The second thing we looked at was angle. And third and fourth kind of roll together, expression and personality, because personality is going to inform your expression. So you can see here I have this, sort of nice looking but rather generic looking portrait. This is fine. This is, again, very school photo style of portrait. Let's pump some personality into this character. So in my mind, this character is very stylish, very inquisitive, So how am I going to use a little bit of head and shoulders to portray that? Well, first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have her leaning forward just a little bit more. And I did have the head starting out with somewhere between an oval and a heart shape. So we're going to lean this character forward. We're going to lower the eye line so that she's looking a little more up at us. And then we're going to have the brows raised to just sort of be, you know, a little more curious. We're actually going to have her looking away to show that even though her body is moving forward, she's interested in something that is not us. The hairline is going to fall right around here. And then the part is here on the left. Well, our left, her right. The nose is going to fall here, and then the mouth is going to fall here. And I want her to have this sort of curious expression. It's just kind of an elevated version of what she has over here, and that's again helped massively by the angle of the face starting off. Got a clip here. And then the hair will just kind of round out here and here. I'm actually going to have her sort of leaning over a little bit. And that's just going to make her seem a little more curious. It was just that easy. Just consider your character's personality and just sort of break them out of that mold of just front facing, which it's fine if it's your first pass with the character and you're just trying to get ideas out there, but then take that idea and push it into some new territory. So I hope these art blocks will help you create more interesting portraits of your OCs. I would love to see what you guys create with these tips. And yeah, tag me on Instagram if you use these to create anything. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a weird day.